Welcome to a land of a lack of accountability. Every step you take, everywhere you look, you see it. It's right in front of you. You even play a part in it. You surround yourself with it every day. Your inner circle, lack of accountability. Your environment, lack of accountability. Social media, lack of accountability. Television, lack of accountability. It's a plague. It's everywhere. But where does that stem from? When does this behavior start? And how do we get to a place where we do know how to hold ourselves accountable? Let's get into that. Oh, and I forgot to say, for those out there that are allergic to real talk and don't want to be held accountable for your actions, you might want to sit this one out. What's goody? I'm your host, J-Smoove, and welcome to The Life Unexamined is Not Worth Living. And we are on episode 10, Accountability. Now, before I get started, you all can find me on Spotify and Apple, and there all of y'all can follow and subscribe to my podcast. Also, I ask that you please take the time out to leave me both a rating and a review. Follow me on IG at the_life_unexamined_podcast. And there I'll be sharing some video content of me discussing various topics that I talk about on my episodes during the week. And I'll also be sharing my words of the day to keep y'all actively thinking. And please visit my website, examineourlives.com, where you can find information about my podcast, information about myself. You can find information about guests that I have on my episodes. I have some blogs that I'm putting together as well. And if you want to reach out to me, you can hit me up on my website. Any suggestions, feedback, any questions that you may have, please don't hesitate to ask. And if it makes it easier for y'all, you can also leave me a voice message on my website. And who knows, I may end up playing a message on one of my episodes, with your consent, of course. All right, so let's get back to business. So now we're going to go to Merriam-Webster's for the definition of accountability: the quality or state of being accountable, an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. Sounds simple enough, right? It is simple in theory, but in reality, this is something that plagues so many of us, and it's crazy. The amount of people that I see that struggle with holding themselves accountable is mind-blowing. It really is mind-blowing. So let me give a quick little breakdown of what a lack of accountability is. And I'm going to expound upon this as the episode goes on. When we make decisions in our lives that lead to poor results, and we have every excuse, reason in the book as to why we did it, but refuse to take accountability for it, it is always the fault of an outside influence. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And for those that are listening right now, this may actually be you. So I'm here today to not only help those that may struggle with this type of behavior, but also show how this behavior can affect so many different aspects of our lives. So when is the first time that we encounter a lack of accountability? I would have to say it's when we're children, because not holding yourself accountable for your actions is childlike behavior. So let's use an example of two little brothers, Greg and Drew. So they're arguing and bickering with each other, and Greg says to Drew, "Man, get out my face, your breath stink." So then Drew says, "I know you're not talking. Your breath smell crazy, and you're stupid. That's a horrible combination, man." So Greg looks at Drew, and he says, "What did you just say to me?" And Drew says, "You heard what I said." So Greg punches him in the face. So Drew starts crying, "Oh, why you punch me in my face? Like, why you do that?" Right? So then the mother comes in. She busts through the door, and she says, "What's going on in here? Why is Drew crying?" So Drew says to the mother, "Greg punched me in my face, and I don't even know why he hit me in my face. He didn't have to do that." So the mother says, "Greg, why you punch your brother Drew in the face?" And Greg says, "Because he said my breath stink, and he said that I'm stupid. He was talking crazy to me, and I don't like that. So I punched him in the face. It was his fault. He shouldn't have said that to me. He triggered me, He got me upset. So I punched him in the face, man. It wasn't my fault at all. It was all Drew. He shouldn't have talked to me like that. He knows that I get upset, and he knows that I could react like that sometimes. So that was his fault. So the mother says, Greg, you didn't have to punch him in his face, though. And y'all were going back and forth, right? Isn't that what y'all were doing? So Drew says, yes, Ma, that's right. We both was going back and forth and saying stuff about each other. It wasn't just me. Greg was doing that too. And Greg says, yeah, I was saying stuff to him, but it was only because he said something to me. That's why I did it. It was his fault. So the mother says, I'm going to address both of y'all. Drew, you know how your brother can get. It doesn't make it right, but you know how he is. And you know that if you go back and forth and y'all start saying disparaging things to each other, you know where it could lead to. So you do play a part in that as well. So you have to take accountability for that. Absolutely. If you want to go back and forth with your brother like that, and you know how he can respond to things, then you have to deal with the consequences that may come from that. Now, Greg, so you said that you were upset and you were triggered, so you punched him in the face. Let me explain something to you. When you used your fist to hit your brother, that was a choice that you made, and you have to own that. It's not your brother's fault that you punched him in the face. Yes, I understand that that was a cause, right? There's causation there. You're explaining why you did it, but at the end of the day, you were in control of your own actions. So when you make the decision to punch him in his face, just understand that there's repercussions and consequences that come with that. So I'm telling you right now, when you get older and you make decisions, take accountability for it and own it. And whatever comes from it, good or bad. So Greg says to his mother, yeah, I hear you, Ma, but I'm just saying, he got to know better not to talk to me like that. So the mother just shakes her head and says, I have to say one last thing to both of you. If y'all want to go back and forth with each other and y'all want to joke around with each other, then do that. But once it gets serious and people start getting in their feelings and they become emotional and they get upset, then both of you need to look within, assess the situation, and say to yourself, nah, this is not worth it. And I know what this could lead to, so let's not even go there. That's what intelligent people do. That's what mature adults do. And you guys are children, and it's okay. Y'all are little boys. It's no problem. But I'm teaching y'all this because when you become adults, you're going to have to learn how to problem solve and learn how to take accountability for your actions. So let's stop right there. So this is typical behavior that we will see with children. They fight, they bicker, they hit each other. Their brains are not fully developed yet, so they don't fully comprehend how to problem solve effectively, how to make mature decisions. They're children. Yes, we have expectations that they will continue to grow, but we know that they're going to continue to indulge in childlike behavior. This is normal. But what if I told you that that childlike behavior continues in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s? And I can keep going, but y'all understand what I'm saying. What if I told you that there are many children walking around on this earth in adult bodies? So I use the example of the little brothers bickering with each other for a reason. I want you all to hold on to this example because it's foundational. This is going to be used as a foundational piece of understanding what it means to not know how to hold yourself accountable. Our environments might change. The scenarios might change. The reasons why we do what we do might change. But ultimately, the choice always lies within us. Holding ourselves accountable comes from within, not some outside influence. It's not somebody else's fault. It's on us, period. Now, I do want to say that I empathize for those who come from certain type of environments, those who come from dysfunction, abuse, trauma. They have to deal with a great deal of loss. I understand all of that. I empathize with that because I personally had to go through some of those things. And that also makes me want to touch on something that I was discussing with someone recently. And we were talking about the crack era. And we were just talking about how crack has destroyed a lot of Black families, Black communities. And to this day, we're still dealing with the effects of that. It led to a lot of dysfunction within families. It led to a lot of children not having fathers, having parents that were on drugs. And I don't usually talk about this type of stuff on my podcast like that, but I think that it's appropriate for this episode. So many of y'all may know this, or maybe you don't, but there is evidence that shows that the CIA and other agencies of the United States government were responsible for the crack epidemic that destroyed black communities in the 1980s. And as this era took place, the media was presenting views of the black neighborhoods transformed by crack. And I mean, I was born in 1988, right? I'm young, but I'm an old head. And actually, I don't even know if I can even call myself young anymore because I'm going to be 40 in a few years. So am I young? Probably not. But I've always been big on learning about history. I also remember the commercials from back in the day, too. Remember the one with the scrambled eggs? And they said, "This is your brain on drugs." Yeah, I remember all of that. But it was like this coming wave of crack babies and all of that. But with all that being said, instead of treating the issue as a public health emergency, which we have today with heroin and opioids, it's a crisis in the suburbs and other types of communities, right? It's such a huge crisis. And these people need so much help. And we have to do everything within our power to give them the assistance that they need. But back then, for a lot of us that were minorities, there wasn't that type of energy at all. And instead, it was a quote unquote war on drugs. And they instituted sentencing guidelines that punish users of crack more harshly than they did of users of powdered cocaine. And pretty much, you got 100 times the amount of prison time for crack than you would for the same substance in powder form, cocaine. This was by design. So I bring this up to talk about how we were literally targeted to become products of our environment. These are just facts. And I'm strictly talking about African American history. I want to make that clear as well, because let's use an example of Europe. Black history is different than Black history in America. Totally different. In Europe, society has a historical sensibility associated with the African contribution. So written languages, homes, roads, schools, that comes from Africans. Like, we're talking about the Moors, all the things that they brought to Spain and Europe, that came from them. Those were Africans. They have a history. They were rulers. Now, contrary to that is African American history, which is pretty much slavery, masters, slaves. Not even close to being the same thing whatsoever. And there were definitely African Americans that built a lot of things, that created a lot, but that is not what is taught to us. And a lot of African Americans, they grow up with an inferiority complex. And even if you think about the Jim Crow laws, the civil rights movement, and all the progress that was made, it quickly turned into cultural assimilation, which again, I personally believe that was by design. Yes, assimilate, fall in line. Don't know your true history, don't learn your true history. And I just want to say this real quick, and then we're going to get right back on topic. So the groups of people who rule over us, and I'm not talking about the government is complicit, but I'm talking more about the 1%, the ruling class, the predator class, whatever you want to call them, that have control over the government, media, financial institutions, etc. They're basically creating a problem, and then they get all of us to buy into that problem, and then they create a solution for the problem that was created by them. So even if we go back centuries, they use word of mouth to convey messages, letters. Then we have radio, the newspapers, then television, and now we have mainstream media. All the same crap, yo. Different methods, the same types of propaganda, the same types of manipulation tactics, and the same types of social engineering. So they put different narratives out there, and we consume it. And many of us actually do this on our level. We create problems, right? We manipulate people, and then we come up with solutions to the problems that we created. But those that are ruling over us, they do it at a much higher level. So when you really think about it, it's sick. And there's a diabolical genius that's involved with this type of mentality. But it's not overly intellectual. It's not intricate. And it doesn't have to be. Because unfortunately, it doesn't really take much for us to buy into what is sold to us, which leads to us bickering with each other and fighting one another. And this tool that they use, this philosophy, it has a name, and it's called the Hegelian dialectic. And I'm going to break that down for y'all. The Hegelian dialectic is problem, reaction, solution. So the first step, which is the thesis, is to create a problem. The second step, antithesis, is to generate a reaction or opposition to the problem, fear, panic, and hysteria. The third step, synthesis, is to offer the solution to the problem created by step one. And that's pretty much what goes on in this world 24/7. And we're just sheep. Now, I might be going a little bit too deep for some of y'all, but hopefully I'm not. But this is the life unexamined. It's not worth living. This is what we do. I just wanted to get that off, and I just wanted to say that because at the end of the day, everything that I talk about is still related to that, but I digress. So I didn't just talk about the crack era and how minorities were targeted for the purpose of giving an excuse for behavior that goes on today. Nah, that wasn't the point of me doing that. I was just giving real history and talking about causation. But I want to say to my people and minorities out there, we're in 2024, where each and every one of us as individuals stand today is ultimately because of us, because of our own actions, not anyone else. And there's still things that go on today that hold us back. That's a fact. I'm not denying that, but there's still no excuse. You understand what I'm saying? Stop being influenced and looking at these children in adult bodies outside, on TV, online, who are involved in ignorance and stupidity. Look within, reflect, examine, and hold yourself accountable. There's so much information out there, and we could do better. Read, study, educate yourself. And I'm not even talking about going to an institution. It doesn't even have to be that. But learn your history, learn yourself. And we have to hold ourselves accountable for our actions. And when it comes to our environment, yeah, I don't care what race you are. I don't care what gender you are. We're all people at the end of the day. And we all are products of our environment. But that doesn't have to be the final product. Now I want to move the conversation over to relationships, partnerships, family, friendships. I want to talk about how accountability is of utmost importance when we're discussing relationships. Accountability encourages you to think about the consequences of your actions. But see, the problem is that we surround ourselves with people who don't hold us accountable at all. So we move around and do whatever we want, and there are no consequences. And then that bleeds into so many different relationships that we have. So while it is important that we learn how to hold ourselves accountable from within, when you double down and surround yourself with those who also don't hold themselves accountable and don't hold you accountable, it's chaos. Our behaviors and actions have an effect on our relationships. We influence our friends, we influence our partners, we influence our family, whether that's positively or negatively. But holding yourself accountable is a healthy piece for a healthy and strong relationship. So just think about when you're in a relationship with somebody, right? And you have a conversation with them and you try to talk to them and they're not trying to hear what you have to say. They're not really listening because they don't agree with you. And you're telling them something about themselves that they may not want to hear. And that could be for many reasons. And that leads to defense mechanisms. And let's use an example of somebody who has low self-esteem and they don't want to address the issues that they may have in their lives because it doesn't make them feel good. They have to look themselves in the mirror. They have to look within. And that's really difficult for a lot of people. So when you're attempting to have a constructive conversation with that person and you want them to acknowledge their hurtful behavior, aka accountability, there's no progress. There's a great deal of deflection that goes on. It always leads to, yeah, that was your fault. Why are you telling me about that? I don't want to hear that. Stop telling me about myself, right? There's an arrogance there. There's always a reason why someone does what they do. And that's valid. There are reasons why we do what we do, but there's no ownership for actions. And then let's use another example of someone who has anger issues. When they have problems, when they're stressed, when they feel uncomfortable, they lash out with anger. So when you're angry, when you're emotional, for most people, you're not going to be in the mindset to listen to people, to understand others, and to create harmony and peace, right? You're angry. So a lot of times that leads to casualties. You could be around people who don't hold you accountable, or you could be around people who do try to hold you accountable, but it never gets anywhere. And this type of behavior is related to the example that I gave with the 2 children. When Greg was angry because of what Drew said to him, and he punched him in the face. So again, childlike behavior, but adults exhibit this as well. An adult's brain is fully developed, but their reasoning skills are not. Their actions are not. The ability is there, but the application is not. They're children. It doesn't change. And that's why I told y'all to keep that first example in the back of your mind throughout this episode, because it all ties together. So when you're trying to have adult conversations with what I call them, as y'all know, children in adult bodies, it usually turns into a blame game. It turns into, yo, it's not my fault. You got to understand, this is why I did it. There's a lot of diversion, a lot of selfishness, and just an overall disconnection from a productive conversation. Okay, so now that we have all this information, how do we move past this type of behavior? Well, we have to build up our self-awareness. So I've talked about this on my podcast many a times. All of these different subjects that I talk about, they're connected, they're aligned. So when I talked about building a foundation, figuring out who you are, if you're conditional, if you're unconditional, figuring out what your core values are, all of these philosophies are a roadmap and a guide to solutions. So in order to become self-aware of your actions, you have to actually know who you are, and you have to know what triggers you. You have to know your habits, your tendencies, and identify why you respond to things the way that you do. So you have to do real work to understand yourself. And once you do that, then now you can get to a place where you can start collaborating with your partner, with your family, with your friends, and you can make some real changes together. But it all starts with you as the individual. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that it is very important to surround yourself with like-minded individuals who hold themselves accountable. Because I'm telling you right now, when you do that in the work and you are holding yourself to a higher standard and holding yourself accountable for your own actions, if you continue to surround yourself with people who don't do that, there is a high likelihood that they may influence you. So be aware of that. And there is a lot of power in surrounding ourselves with like-minded individuals. But so many of us don't do that. And this leads to stagnation. It leads to a lack of growth. And when you're communicating with those whose core values no longer align with your core values, now there's potential for you to be triggered. They can just pull you right back to where you were before. So once you start surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded, then when you collaborate with them, and I'm not talking about the difficulty level of it, but if we appreciate the process, it's a beautiful thing. So if you take the time to talk to your partner, your family, your friends, and you become more aware of your actions and how they affect others, then it's going to lead to development and maturation, which in turn leads to trust amongst those around you. Because when the people around you see that you are responsible for your own actions, that builds a great deal of trust. Now the people around you may say, yo, he holds himself accountable. She holds herself accountable. So now they know that there are no more excuses on your end. And they also know that you will hold them accountable for their actions as well. There's no suspicion. There's no doubt. There's confidence there. And trust becomes an afterthought because your actions prove that time and time again. And remember, don't just only look to have meaningful conversations when you're emotional, when you're upset, and when you're having negative arguments. Many of us have a tendency to want to have meaningful conversations during conflict. And I will say that if you are able to have meaningful conversations during arguments or when you're very passionate or during conflict and you're able to combat your emotions with logic, then that's dope. Because personally, I do know how to do that. And that's a skill. But you have to be able to do that with someone else that is going to reciprocate the same thing back to you. So, A, if you know how to do it and it's a skill for you, then find somebody else that will reciprocate that. Or B, you don't know how to do that at all, is not a part of your repertoire, then my advice is stay away from that, please. Because if you don't stay away from that, then it leads to nothing but dysfunction. For real. So instead, let's have conversations with the people that we love and the people that are important to us on a regular basis. Let's make this communication business as usual when emotions are not running high. And holding yourself accountable is not just from a negative perspective, right? For things that we do wrong. Holding yourself accountable could be for things that we do right and the positive that we put in the world. So take an account for that too. So assess your regular behaviors, not only when it leads to conflict or problems. That is important. 100% assess that type of behavior, but also assess your behaviors that lead to happiness, that leads to peace, that leads to healthy companionship, and meditate on that, because that shows that you have the ability to do it. It's not just reflecting on a negative, it's reflecting on all of our actions in life, period. But the foundational piece is the accountability, which we are not equating to trying to change your personality, completely changing yourself for someone else. No, that's not what we're talking about. Y'all know that I don't even believe in that type of stuff. That's trash, B. That's basura. So before I get out of here, I want to say that regardless if you were taught to take accountability for your actions or not, we have to be able to humble ourselves and understand that we are adults that are engaging in childlike behavior. And that may be a tough pill to swallow, and that may be hard to hear. But if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then it probably is a duck. Nah, but I'm serious, yo. I'm serious. If we're seeking real progress and real growth, then we have to be honest with ourselves. So if you do have an open mind and you're ready to throw the excuses out of the window and own up to your actions, then come take this walk with me. And now I welcome you to a land of accountability, where every step you take, everywhere you look, you see it is right in front of you. And you even play a part in it. You surround yourself with it every day. Like-minded individuals who not only hold themselves accountable for their actions, but they hold you accountable as well. So hopefully all of y'all will be making this land your permanent home. And I guarantee that once you learn to take accountability, you can start to have control of your life and manifest aspirations in a way that you didn't think was possible, which in turn leads to you becoming the best versions of yourselves. And I don't know about y'all, but getting rid of that childlike mentality and learning to own up to your actions and hold yourself accountable, well, that's just another path to a life that's worth living. I'm your host, J-Smoove, and you just listened to The Life Unexamined is Not Worth Living. And I'm out of here. Peace.